ladies and gentlemen. So in today's video, we are going to be talking about Call of Duty. Now, Call of Duty's former director has decided to make a statement that I find to be very interesting. And it kind of goes into the entire conversation that is happening right now between Call of Duty and Battlefield. Everybody knows that Call of Duty and Battlefield have been competing massively right now. Even though right now Call of Duty does not have a recent video game, they are currently getting ready to release Black Ops 7 that almost nobody outside of the typical Call of Duty players seem to be excited for. But they are getting ready to release that, and that's going to allow us to see a more definitive answer between how the other two, like how they're competing against each other, right? Because right now the numbers are about 64,000 24-hour peak for Call of Duty with Black Ops 6 and about 40,000 people playing the game right now at the time of filming this video. If you look at Battlefield 6, you got almost 500,000 people for the 24-hour peak with about 289,000 people playing right now at the time of this video. So clearly, there's a massive difference between Call of Duty and Battlefield 6. But again, Black Ops doesn't have a recent game out right now, but it will pretty soon, and we'll be able to see from there. However, the former Call of Duty director says that he is immensely worried about the future of the series under Xbox. Now, it's so funny that he says this, and we're going to get into what he said, Glenn Schofield. It's so funny that he says this because one of the most interesting things about the FTC conversation when it was happening when Xbox, or I should say when Microsoft was looking to buy out Activision Blizzard, one of the most amazing things about all this is that they said they were worried about the future of Call of Duty as well. They said that they were worried about Microsoft trying to essentially be anti-competition by potentially removing Call of Duty from, other platforms outside of Xbox. And they had to end up coming up with this deal that said that Call of Duty was going to be around on all systems for XYZ amount of years. We still don't know what's going to happen after that. But I just find it interesting that a lot of people, once Xbox basically became the home of Call of Duty in the way, everybody kind of looked at it and said, well, this is probably going to be very questionable. Should this really be the platform that is going to have the ownership and the decision-making for Call of Duty? I don't know. Seems a little odd. So Glenn Schofield points to the decline of Halo and questions cultural compatibility. Now, obviously, we talked about Halo on streams. We just talked about how Halo supposedly is going to be getting another live service video game, something more live service dedicated. I don't really know if that's a great idea. I think you should be focusing on perhaps trying to make Halo into a franchise that people actually care about again versus trying to figure out how you can overly monetize a dead franchise. But, I'm not an Xbox executive, so what do I know? But I do find Halo's trajectory into failure to be a prime example of what could happen to basically anything that Microsoft owns these days. Because let's be real, Microsoft marketing is terrible. The reason why Microsoft's consoles are the worst selling consoles by a long shot compared to everybody else is because they spent the entire time trying to convince everybody that you don't need an Xbox to play Xbox. Nobody else was doing that. Nintendo's out here saying, well, you need a Nintendo to play Nintendo. PlayStation's out here saying, well, you need a PlayStation to play PlayStation at least for the first year, and then we're going to put it on PC to get more sales. But Xbox is like, nah, bro, we're whores. You can play our games anywhere. You don't need our hardware. You don't need our consoles. You don't need any of that, right? So it was some of the worst marketing ever. So people ended up checking out little by little because, well, who gives a shit, right? So now former Call of Duty director Glenn Schofield says that he's immensely worried about the future of the franchise and questions whether the Xbox makers' culture will be compatible with the teams behind the hugely popular FPS over the long term. During a decade at his studio for Sledgehammer Games, Schofield directed installments Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 from 2011, Advanced Warfare 2014, World War II 2017. He left the studio. He co-founded in 2019 before going on to build the Callisto Protocol. Now, listen, with all due respect, Mr. Schofield, Callisto Protocol, that's not it, bro. That's not it. A lot of people clearly do not like that game. It's a very badly reviewed video game. And people clearly think you missed the mark on that aspect. However, we're still going to listen to what you have to say. So speaking to the VGC at Gamescom Asia, Schofield said that he was skeptical about whether the FPS series can remain as successful under Microsoft, citing culture concerns such as the way in which staff are incentivized and Microsoft's recent track record with franchises like Halo, which have declined in popularity. Now, me personally, I think that it was a really bad decision. You want to know why? Because the moment they looked at Call of Duty, one of the top-selling franchises in the world, unfortunately, even though it's on a decline right now, it still is and was one of the top-selling franchises at one point, every single fucking year, nonstop. It is a bad mix to give Call of Duty something that has been known to have so many sales and give it to Xbox that has been known to whore out their video games on Game Pass and not care about sales in the hopes to push Game Pass. That was a bad move because here's the problem, right? You gave people Call of Duty for free. Essentially, you gave people Call of Duty on Xbox Game Pass. You can't go back on that now. People who got used to playing Black Ops 6 for free, essentially, are not going to want to start spending $80 to buy the next Call of Duty if you were to take it away from Game Pass. People are going to be highly, highly against that. You cannot take things away like that once you give it to them. You have to continue giving to them. So Microsoft, being the geniuses that they were, they sacrificed a massively selling franchise to Game Pass. They fed the beast to Game Pass, and Call of Duty feeding Game Pass is and always will be extremely wild to me. You got people willing to spend whatever to play the next Call of Duty because of FOMO, and they don't want to miss it out with their friends, and you sacrificed all of it for Game Pass to get a couple of subs that you ended up losing anyway. I don't know. I think it was a really bad decision. But anyway, he says, I worry about it immensely. I really do. He told the VGC, because what's happening to Gears of War? Where's Halo? You know what I mean? And you look at EA, you look at these big companies, and I'm like, where's the Strike games? Where's this game? And there's so many to just fall by the wayside. He continued, unfortunately, once you're assimilated by one of these companies, I think you take on some of their traits. The other thing is, I don't know, but I would imagine that Call of Duty bonus system is out, and now you have theirs, and people are going to say, well, that isn't that. Microsoft acquired the Call of Duty franchise as part of its $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard in 2023, and will point to the strong performance of its last entry as evidence that the FPS is as popular as ever. Now, again, guys, there's different explanations to what you would consider strong performance. It's pretty clear. I don't know if you guys read the news lately. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. But Black Ops lost over $300 million in sales opportunities. That comes out to about 4 million some odd copies. They lost out on $300 million plus in revenue. They even admitted that perhaps it was probably a mistake to do that. They lost out on the opportunity for over 4 million copies for Black Ops 6 because they sacrificed it to Game Pass. Now, people will obviously say, well, they probably garnered some Game Pass subscriptions from that. And I do believe that Black Ops was a Game Pass mover. But was it enough to make up those loss in sales? Probably not. I think what they were hoping for is that the people who bought the game or got the game on Game Pass, I think they were hoping for microtransaction money. At that point, they're hoping that the money will make up for the loss of sacrificing it to Game Pass, which it probably did, right? It probably did, or at least got to the point where it broke even or went slightly past that. But ultimately, still, you're doing all this extra work. You're doing all this extra push just to end up at the same place or less than where you were before. I think that's pretty fucking stupid, right? But the reason why they're doing that is because for Microsoft, Game Pass is the thing. Like they need Game Pass to constantly look stronger and stronger and stronger every year. They need that because that's what they've convinced their investors is the thing, right? Xbox is Game Pass now. Xbox is nothing else but Game Pass. That's where it is. And if they got to make it up in microtransactions and sacrifice one of their biggest video game franchises to the beast of Game Pass, then they will do that, right? But that's what he's talking about when it comes to culture comparison. That's really what he's mentioning here. Last year's Call of Duty Black Ops was the first to launch day and date on Xbox Game Pass, although early results were positive, with Microsoft declaring it the biggest Call of Duty launch ever in terms of players. Of course, it's going to be the biggest. You released it for free on Game Pass. Well, not free, but you get what I'm saying. Of course, I hate this shit. I really do. I hate when they're like, this is the biggest ever in terms of players engaged. Bro, everybody and their mother can see through that bullshit. All right? So, of course, it's going to have the most players. You gave it away on Game Pass, bro. Anyway, the game saw a sharper post-launch decline than usual. Well, that's because the content is being memed right now, okay? The content is being memed drastically because people are looking at what you did with Black Ops 6 and they're like, why is Beavis and Butthead running around? Why is Nicki Minaj twerking on my body? It was bad enough that I would get teabagged after getting killed, but now you got Nicki Minaj and her stank ass, wop fucking spreading her cheeks on my face. If she would clean it up, it probably wouldn't be a problem. But you know what I mean? When it's dirty, it's a problem. Anyway, it's like, bro, what are we doing? Why are you doing that? People are memeing the hell out of the game. Schofield said his pessimism about the future of Call of Duty is also related to the departure of the key staff. As well as his exit, co-founder Michael Condrey also left Sledgehammer Games, followed by Black Ops veteran David Vonderhaar. I hate doing this, but since I left Sledgehammer, none of the games have been very good. Ooh, my man is calling out the games for being trash. He said, Schofield said, I mean, the last one, Modern Warfare 3, was a 50. They still sell well. You know, that happens. You move. I always wonder, why did you take that guy out? It's not going to work later. And very few times does that work. They just aren't as good. They aren't the same. Treyarch's still really good, but you know, I feel like I got lucky. I feel like I was at the heyday of EA during my time there. I mean, it was a who's working there. And then when I got to Activision, I made Modern Warfare 3 in 2011. As a matter of fact, Modern Warfare 3 was the last Call of Duty to win Action Game of the Year, and my 2 other games were nominated for it. But now, you know, you don't see them. That's actually a great point. That's actually a really great point. His game was the last one to win Action Game of the Year. That's actually a really good, interesting point. So again, guys, at this point, we all know that Call of Duty is a franchise that is the prime example of what it means to have degradation of franchise, where, yes, a franchise is still doing well. Yes, it's still making money, sure. But in terms of the franchise overall, there is a degradation there. There are people checking out. They don't have as many players as they had before. Is it still enough for them to monetize? Absolutely. Is it still enough for them to hopefully break even or make a profit? Absolutely. But it's nowhere near what it used to be, especially in terms of profitability. Nowhere near where it used to be. There is clearly a difference here. Whereas Battlefield is seeing some of the biggest real numbers than it's ever seen ever, right? Battlefield 6 sold 7 million copies in 3 days. In 3 days, Battlefield 6 sold 7 million real copies. We're not talking about 7 million players engaged. We're talking about 7 million copies sold. That is a big difference in numbers, right? And it's pretty clear that, again, I even think, I'll say this, I think that Black Ops 7 is going to make this number rise probably to about 200,000, if I had to guess. About 200,000. I think that's what it's going to be on Steam. I can't speak about anywhere else or players engaged or whatever bullshit. I can't speak about that because nobody knows because they don't release their numbers, right? So this, I feel like, is a prime example, and it's going to only hit about probably 200,000 units, in my opinion, okay? At least on Steam. Anywhere else, I can't speak to. Whereas Battlefield 6 is pretty obvious that the game is a massive hit, massive success, and it's clearly holding on to its players fairly decently with a drop that's going down clearly because people are leveling. But again, you're going to have Call of Duty players try this out and quit. I think that's the reason why this number was so high the way it was, because it was a cultural thing. Everybody was getting behind it, but Battlefield's not for everyone. Just like Call of Duty's not for everyone. Both of these games can exist together in harmony. They don't have to necessarily go after each other's throat. However, they should be used against each other if you want to make both products better, in my opinion. The reason why Battlefield 6 is the way that it is right now is because Call of Duty was the way that it was for so long. Call of Duty was felting Battlefield left and right in terms of players and how many people were actually buying their game versus Battlefield. Now, Battlefield had to get better. It just had to. And now it's at the point now where people are actually playing the game more than Call of Duty. So now it's Call of Duty's turn to get better. How they're going to respond? I don't know. That's up to them. So we'll see what ends up happening, guys. But let me know in the comments down below. What do you think about this entire situation between Call of Duty? What do you think about his the former director and what he said? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, consider hitting that like and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one.